stay tuned for that. Should be in the Malt Messenger tomorrow. But I think we've wasted enough of people's times trying to sell them things. Should we now spend the next hour and a half preaching about stuff that is mostly sold out? Does that work? I've got Kurt and Sean on the chat with me tonight, which is a good thing because I don't know if you can hear it, but I think I'm starting to lose my voice, which is somewhat unexpected. Hopefully it'll last through the tasting. We've got a little bit of medicine to preserve it. But we've got a fun lineup here, which is, I believe, the first 4 Whiskyland releases. Whiskyland is the range that's replacing Whiskey Sponge. Begs the question, is it more of the same? Likely. I think it's a bit of a reset. I think this range, like Whiskey Sponge, will go to 100, but who knows how many little side projects and cul-de-sacs Angus will find his way into along the way to 100. But we've been big fans of the Whiskey Sponge range. I've got high hopes for this Whiskyland range too. And we're starting off with a couple of bangers. We're starting our tasting with the 2 oldest whiskeys in the lineup, a 31-year-old Glen Grant and then a 33-year-old BenRiach. So I'm going to pop that Glen Grant up on the screen. Kurt, I think you're already well ahead of me. What are your thoughts on this Glen Grant?
Yeah, I'm nosing ahead of you a little bit here on all of them. Lots of bubblegummy kind of notes, tropical Skittles kind of candy, a lot of melons, a lot of like those orangey kind of fruits that lean into tropicals, a lot of creaminess.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little bit more elegant than I would have expected it to be honest with you. Really pretty.
Why do you say that? Are you thinking that at 31 years of age, the Glen Grant would be like a little over oaked? Like what were your concerns on that front?
No, I just think Glen Grant sits just a little bit heavier than this, even on the nose. This feels like a really, really light version of it, almost like a shandy version where you've added a drop or 2 of 7 or something just to make it a little more effervescent. Really, really light for a Glen Grant sage.
Well, refill cask, 93 vintage, bottled at 31 years of age, 52.7%. It is kind of light and fresh and fruity. The nose kind of reminds me of like maybe not chocolates, but like Easter themed jelly beans, kind of gelatin candies, a little bit waxy.
Anything but those bloody yellow marshmallow peep
The
things.
peeps.
Yeah, gross.
I don't think I've ever actually eaten a peep in my life. Aren't you supposed to put them in the microwave and they explode or something like that?
I honestly can't remember a flavor even, but I remember being absolutely traumatized by them. When my kids started eating them, it literally gave me grumpy, shivery feelings.
Yeah. This is going into some Skittles territory now too.
I think Kurt mentioned Skittles. Yeah, I was thinking more a little bit more kind of lemon and lime, maybe a meringue tart. It's the nose at the beginning had a bit of a neat tart, like fermented apple like note on it, but that seems to be a little bit, I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm still getting it now.
You get a bit of peach cobbler too.
Yeah, I mean, the palate, it's creamy, decadent, some nice fruity tones, a little faint bit of funk in there too, and some nice kind of mushroomy, dunnagey notes. Angus's description of this, or I mean, to be fair, I guess we don't know if these are Angus's words or his wordsmithing anymore, but perhaps the most dense and complex of these rich ecosystems are the dunnage jungles of northern Whiskyland. It's got a bit of that kind of dunnage earthy note, but I mean, it's so light. I mean, it's surprisingly fresh and vibrant for refill bourbon, even at 31 years of age. It's kind of juicy.
That's more typical Glen Grant, I find, on the palate.
The juicier notes?
Sorry?
You said the juicier notes are more typical for you?
No, just the overall, like the feeling of it, the weight of it, the flavor profile. It seems a little more pure school Glen Grant to me than it does.
Like kind of the earthy, I know the spices are probably more an oak construct than the spirit, but I mean, you're starting to see some of those elements of it that allow it to mature in like fresh sherry and be bottled at older ages, which it famously has been a lot by, say, Gordon MacPhail. We don't see a lot of older Glen Grant from, I mean, again, short of Gordon MacPhail releases. There's just not a lot of people that seem to have it. Signatory, we've seen a couple releases, but nothing recently.
Probably, yeah. Even historically, I think signatory we would see a little bit more, like in the like early mid-teens kind of thing, or mid 2010s. I mean,
Have you been to the distillery, Andrew?
I have been a couple times. Been to the Major's wall safe and was extremely disappointed by what they had saved in it. Like they made it out like it was going to be this really special VIP tour where they weren't going to take the rest of the guests. And the distillery famously has an African themed garden because Major Grant fought in Britain's colonial wars in Africa, and he brought a bunch of plants back from Africa with him and a manservant who was like a child that was kind of wandering and orphaned. So he actually did a lot of good for this young person. I think he was well treated, but it was a different era when you could just, well, I don't know if you all remember Madonna getting in trouble. You could just take a child from Africa and no one would ask any questions. You knew at some point that was going to have to slide into this. But anyway, at the back of this garden where the stream comes into the distillery, there's a wall safe. And they built this up. And like, I think the Glen Grant tour was set up by Gordon MacPhail like 19 years ago. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be so cool. I bet they're going to have like one of those 1950s vintage Glen Grants in the wall safe. No, it's just like Glen Grant 5-year-old. It was incredibly disappointing. But it was still cool to see it. It's this little wall safe where the Major would keep a special dram for his buddies when they came over. And from a technical standpoint, one of only a couple distilleries with a spirit purifier, which is the same contraption that Ardbeg has on its spirit still.
no, I didn't know that. That's kind of cool.
Kurt, I know that was a long-winded answer to a partially asked question. I know you said, had I been to Glen Grant, but was there a second component to that question that I
No,
got over?
but there was an ulterior motive. You tend to have a lot of fun, and the vibe gets pretty awesome when we're riffing on stories and stuff. And some of these distilleries that I haven't been to, you get to fill me in on some shit that I haven't had my eyes on myself. So I love it.
I mean, the Space Side is not where you'd expect to see an African themed garden. I would say that much. It's a little cold and a little wet, but it's still pretty cool.
I spent some time in a beautiful Zen garden in Glasgow. Scots are weird.
I think you can put a sandbox anywhere and it'll suit the climate, maybe except for Antarctica. Yeah, comments back on the whiskey. It's lovely. Very fresh. I have to say, like, I know we've had a couple of other Glen Grants in recent tastings. I think I like this one of the other Decadent Drams Glen Grants we have. I think this is probably my favorite of the three. I think those other two, they were a little younger, they were a little rougher than this. Like this has got a nice elegance to it.
Yeah, that mellowness from the age is just shining through beautifully. It's almost starting like it was almost leaning into some of those more polishy notes on the palate too, which is kind of fun because I love those notes.
Well, it's got a bit of like lacquered wood on the nose. Like going into someone's house from the 60s and that lacquer is starting to peel off of it. But yeah, it's a pretty whiskey. It's elegant. There are a handful of bottles of this left, one or two. I'm not sure exactly how many for those who are interested. But shall we on to the BenRiach? 33 years of age. Still got a decent number of these left. 1991 vintage for this one. It is refill sherry hogsheads. So, although it must be just a hogshead plural or singular. And what else do we know? 55.9%. So interesting, 1991 BenRiach. Just trying to think back to those halcyon days when we had incredible selection of distillery bottled BenRiach vintages. And I don't know why, but 1991 doesn't seem to strike me as a vintage that we saw a lot of. I know we saw quite a few 80s, mid 90s, like 1996. We saw a bunch of stuff from that year, and 98, 97.
That was one, lots of all those.
Mhm. Yeah, lots of stuff from the 70s and early 80s, but not so much early 90s. Which is an interesting question. I mean, I wonder if BenRiach was even operating in 1991. Maybe our chat Jeff PT could fact check that for us if he's. I'm just kidding, Jeff. You don't have to do that. Somebody will look into it. It doesn't have to be Jeff.
We have both Doug and Jeff here tonight.
Oh,
I
that's
feel
right.
like sleep.
We got Douglas on this one too. I forgot about that. And there's there's Mr. Bourne. Mr. Bourne likes to crack some details out every once in a while too. So obviously quite a bit more sherry on the nose. Well, the other one didn't have any sherry. Refill sherry hogshead cask. It's still quite soft. Some nice chocolate tones, little leather, dried fruits. Kurt, what are you getting on this?
Oh man, this is so antique-y. I love it. This is like the era of BenRiach that was actually exciting. It's fairly cask aggressive, I think, in a way. Like you get a lot of wood influence here, but it's what sherry should be, as far as I'm concerned. You either get the like crazy over the top ones that are cherry red. They're gorgeous, they're fun, too dumpy, to be honest. Or you get the spice bomb youngins. This is what like a good older sherry cask should. I love it. I love like the dulce de leche kind of notes. I love the soft tobacco kind of notes. It smells like old spirit. Could be,
Yeah.
you could fool me that it was some other spirit probably. I get like a slightly muted cough syrup sort of note too.
Well, here's a bold question though. What are the chances that this was full-term maturation refill sherry hogshead? Did Angus finish this?
If he did, that's seamless finishing, like artistic. This feels like it's really, really deeply integrated.
John?
Yeah, I agree with Kurt on the tobacco. I was getting that fairly early on, but even on the nose, almost to the point where like someone had a bit that was already singed and put it back in the pouch because I'm not gonna say smoke, but definitely something that leans into that area. You guys were going a lot more in that spice and richer side of sherry, where I was thinking a bit more like condensed papaya syrup and something a little bit more not overly tropical, but definitely like an exotic syrup of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Kurt was, to be fair, suggesting that the nose was kind of that antique old tropical sherry. I see that now on the palate. I didn't get that as much on the nose. I mean, I can see it. I can see a bit of it now, but I was getting more of the leather and tobacco, the dried fruits. When you get to the palate, it is definitely more syrupy, very, very fruity. Um, so I did my own fact checking. BenRiach was in production. It actually didn't close in the 1990s, though I have to imagine that their production was relatively low. And there were a handful of official releases of BenRiach from 1991, but not a lot. Actually, very, very few official bottlings. Curiously, Signatory's done a couple, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is a sister cask to that. And there was some done for La Maison de Whiskey, which was also more or less Signatory, and also second fill sherry. So who knows? Maybe these were, full term maturation refill sherry BenRiachs from 91. Yeah, James is commenting there. So BenRiach has an interesting history because it opened 1898, closed 1901, and then it didn't open again until 1965. And in fact, I don't even think the first production was until 66. Regardless, like it's a distillery that's been closed more years than it's been open. Although at some point in the not too distant future, that metric might change. Yeah. Any guys, what do you think about this on the palate? Kurt, I know you commented on the nose for us.
Yeah, I love it. It's got like a denseness on the palate. It's really pretty. I think the weight kind of works really, really well with how syrupy it was, like you mentioned.
Mhm.
Gives me a little bit of like hot cross buns and stuff. A little bit of
Mhm.
maillard on top and going onto it too. Deep fruits, really, really pretty. And I get a little bit of like wet. It's fairly grippy on the palate as it gets to the back end. It's a little bit tannic.
Yeah, there's some nice like firm tannins, spices, like those classic leather chocolate tobacco tones. But it, to your point before, I don't know if I would describe the palate on this as being super antique, but it's definitely leaning more towards that than not. It doesn't, it's not, this is more an old school style sherry rather than new school. And it's quite soft and it's got some nice layers to it.
I think like he was mentioning that these like Whiskyland is a series that's supposed to be kind of like a no holds barred bottling the best. It's like some of the best stuff that I guess you can find or something along those lines. I gotta be honest, like between these first two samples, like it shows some promise, man. These are both like some real banger samples.
Well, but I mean, can we stop on that for a moment? Because I love it when companies say that they're only going to bottle the best, because like everybody says that. Like, if you're not bottling the best, whether you actually are or not, why are you even in business? But I agree. These are both bangers to start off with. Both are showing really, really well. Okay. Great two starting drams. Are we satisfied enough with that one to move on to the blended malt?
So,
Go ahead, Kurt.
so I concede I have a big bias for this. I did have a tiny little taste from Igor at one point. Sean and I shared it out of a tumbler. It wasn't ideal nosing, but I was like, oh, this is cool. It's old school and kind of dumpy and a little bit ashy. I did grab a couple because I really, really dug the style. Had it a few times now, but I'm trying to be sparing with the bottle because this is something we don't see very often. So this whiskey, for those that don't know, it's a 23-year-old blended malt that spent the last year, I believe, in Ardbeg. So you never really get that from the nose. But the components that went into this blended malt have spent 23 years married in that, in total. But the pieces that went in for those 23 years were substantially old. So we don't know how old this whiskey is. Angus doesn't know or hasn't told us anyways, but there's stuff that's a lot older than 20. So it's a bottle.
This has some similarities to something I was teasing about that's dropping tomorrow, although that the wild card in this is finishing in an ex Ardbeg refill, but is going to add a little bit of je ne sais quoi to this. Sean, what do you think of this guy?
Yeah, as Kurt said, we had a sneak peek of this already, and it was pretty spectacular, even with the crappy glassware that we use. I I've said it before. I think like finishing in peated casks is one of my favorite ways of imbuing peat into whiskey. I think this definitely like it definitely follows along that same line for me. I think he said specifically it was like the ex Ardbeg butt that the last Islay sponge I believe was in. So I guess I wonder. He said 1 year. I think Kurt, you said it was about a year was finished. Yeah, I mean a beautiful year. He did a couple more things like this that you remember the NAS 30 that we had that was like it was a bunch of malts that he said was like even in the 50s and 60s from Signatory. And then he did one before that in the sponge line too, which I've been trying to get for a good price, but I don't want to have to pay to have it stored in the UK or anything like that. But one day I'll get it.
I think this is a little different because I was just looking at the description and it says it's a 2001 vintage blended malt, which makes me wonder if this is just another Edrington parcel that he's then finished in Ardbeg for a year. Because the producer description talks about this being a single butt of 2001 blended malt. Now that doesn't mean there couldn't be stuff in there that's older than that, but then that would be odd that they were referencing the vintage. But Kurt, you've got a bottle there. What does your bottle say?
I do. It says it's a single sherry butt of blended malt 2001. As we understand it, this blended malt stock was actually filled in 2001 using a mix of component malts, most of which were considerably older at the time. Probably explains its rather old school classical sherry. So this bottling, or this as it exists, was married together in 2001 with stocks.
Yeah. I guess I mean, that you could say that about anything that we know it was filled on X date or blended. But I mean, does this, I don't know, to me, it doesn't taste like this is way older than 2001. To me, this tastes entirely plausible that this is a 2001 vintage blended malt finished in an Ardbeg cask. Just to be devil's advocate on this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Couldn't argue that. It's one of those ones that kind of tiptoes that line where I think you can make an argument in either direction, but I don't think that you can make say
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think like Kurt and I even talked about this a little bit because I think I think for a bit I was siding with you, Andrew, and that I was leaning more towards one of those kind of like a pre-assembled thing, but something that was purposeful at the time and then kind of got forgotten about. I guess, well, I don't know. We should have had Angus on here, made him stay up till 4 a.m. to tell us, but who knows?
Well, I think, like the rest of us, in our middle decades, he probably doesn't like staying up much past 10 or 11 at night, especially since he's got some young people, to concern himself with. I think this is good. I mean, to be honest, it doesn't blow my mind, but it's good.
This is the kind of whiskey I think I would be drinking in like a dingy little Scottish bothy in the middle of nowhere. It just has that like stood on the roof, like I'm in the middle of nowhere, archaic school style of whiskey. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I enjoy it quite a bit. I like it's not like that I guess the booze texture on it, like kind of like on the back end, really accentuates that peat in a very fiery kind of way. And it, I don't know, it brings to mind like a burning raspberry bush to me for some reason. I don't know, because it's still pretty fruity on everything, but that not so overt smoke is just like a really nice accent on the finish.
Well, I just did a lateral to try it against said blended malt berries bottling that I've mentioned a couple times that's dropping tomorrow. And I mean, I think it's got a nicer palate to it. So I know, Ryan, you were asking, is there any chance of getting this? The answer is no. This one is all done. Unless Igor just all of a sudden emails us and says, yeah, I've got one more case. I don't think we'll see any more of this, because the sad reality is it was a single cask, got distributed around the world. Igor probably got 2 or 3 6-packs of it. But I did toss the blended malt. We're going to be putting in our newsletter tomorrow. It's not as sherried as this, but I think it's a bit more complex and elegant on the palate. Before we move off from this, Kurt, maybe because you're probably the most sensitive to any of us to this, I mean, would you pick up from this that it was an Ardbeg cask? Like,
I don't know. On the nose, absolutely not. It almost doesn't smell like peat on the nose to me. It's only on the palate, and it has that dry ashiness that's kind of hallmark Ardbeg. But other than that, like dry cocoa, dried ashiness, I don't think I would guess it. It's a little bit more Ardmore-ish to me than Ardbeg.
yeah, it's funny you say that, because when I was first nosing this, there was an element of it that kind of had a little bit of a manure kind of Ardmore kind of note to it, but like sherried Ardmore, so the good Ardmore. And yeah, it works nicely. I think mentioning that Ardbeg thing is just, if you're a salesperson, I guess you can do whatever you need to do to sell your product, but it seems, other than that, it's a tie into a previous release. The fact it was an Ardbeg cask doesn't really seem to make a huge impact here.
You know what? Like it's funny that you say that. I distinctly remember that Ardbeg being one of the farmiest ones I've ever had.
There you go. There is a direct connection. Okay. To Bowmore, sadly sold out. What do we got here? I'll put it up on the screen. So 20-year-old Bowmore, 53.3 refill hogshead, doesn't actually specify. Originally filled in 2004. And all of these, I kind of love it. I know, Kurt, I know you love these bottles, these kind of antique kind of cognac bottles that they've done for their Whiskyland range. They are pretty baller.
I like their labels quite a bit.
Mhm. Do you miss the sponge?
There's certain ones that had a little je ne sais quoi, I think, but some of them were outright not great.
Kurt, at some point today, you're gonna have to say je ne sais quoi, then all three of us will have used that turn of phrase.
Did you? Oh, I didn't even catch on that you said it.
No, I mean, Sean, I'm just joking. I don't think I've used that turn of phrase in a tasting this year, let alone last year. And then both of us do it within the space of 30 minutes. I mean, the nose on this is quite shy. Now, it could be because I've not got the exaggerated blender's glass for this one. Once I start teasing it out, it does have kind of that nice creamy, very like lemon, lime, citrus forward, salty, gentle smoke thing. Kind of, Kurt, I can see you nodding, vaguely Tempest-esque.
I love all the notes you said. 100%. It's like a lime custard to me. I'd scribble down here.
Mhm.
We've had so many cool Bowmores arriving over the last little while that are in their late teens and 20s now. It obviously shows that there was a decent amount produced at that time, and almost all of it has been. A bunch of you guys probably know this from the society. The SMWS has released a couple of fantastic 18, give or take, last little while. We had our 26-year-old, or still have our 26-year-old in the store. But it's really, really cool to see some of these Bowmores that are a little bit more pure, a little bit more what you actually try at the distillery versus the kind of dumbed down crap that Suntory eats us all the time. And if you guys haven't hit the palate on this one yet, that's all I can say.
Palette on this is lovely. On one element, though, I mean, I think it still comes across Bowmore-esque, but it doesn't have that. Well, we're not going to say it. It doesn't have that kind of lavender note that you would get. Obviously, this is a 2000s vintage Bowmore, something that we saw a lot of in the 80s and the 90s. There might be faint echoes of it, but it's a different kind of Bowmore. Maybe a little bit of a cleaner profile of Bowmore.
It's fairly clean. I think I find it pretty almost not quintessential, but like definitely like very Bowmore DNA personally. Kevin was mentioning that he was possibly detecting a hint of sulfur. I'm not sure if you guys are not, but
I don't get sulfur.
I'm also partially blind to it, so I'm not the right person to ask.
I'm yeah, I agree. I don't either. I mean, you can get it. I mean, I think we haven't probably talked about it a lot in tastings in a while. You can get it from the grain, but I don't think that would be the case here. I think if anything, maybe it could be a kind of a combo of some of those maritime elements, like a combo of the salt, the citrus, and the smoke. But yeah, Josh saying he got more of it in the blend. Anyway,
And that there's like so much guava and like pink grapefruit juice, passion fruit, so many tropical notes on the mid palate towards the back. In the finish, when it's 30 seconds swallowed and dead, it kind of leans into old Port Ellen, proper OBs. Finishes all on each side, minerally Port Ellen.
Just going back to that for a minute, I mean, it's kind of funny to think about this. Granted, small release, I don't remember how many of these came in. It was either 4 or 6 bottles that we got, maybe 3 times that or 2 times that came into the market. So not a lot of it. Not inexpensive, like $720 a bottle. Granted, it's not quite as mature as this, but if someone's looking for a cheap alternative Bowmore that's in sort of in that same wheelhouse, like that, what is it, the Vaults collection that we have on sale, like which we bought a bunch of cast strength. It's probably only like low teens Bowmore in terms of its overall or its youngest components, but pretty bloody good release as well. Sean, any other thoughts on this one before we move on?
I was just doing some stuff in the chat there. No, I don't really have anything else.
Okay. All right. Shall we move on to the reason why most of you are probably in tonight's tasting? I mean, I'd like to think that people were in here for more than just the Springbank, but we have to acknowledge it is definitely a draw. Let's see here. Put this up on the screen. So this is gone. This was the first release in the new Whiskyland series. 26-year-old Springbank from 1998. First fill sherry, but don't have the ABV. Kurt, do you know what the ABV on this one is? Or it's on the bottle, 56.8. So long gone. Kurt, you might know this, or Sean, do we still have the last, we had a couple bottles of the last Whiskey Sponge Springbank still in store.
Yeah, there's one last bottle of the Westy Sponge.
All right. Well, what do we think about the Whiskyland bottling? I mean, other than the fact, like, where the hell is Angus getting all these like older Springbanks? Because he's had a few. We're not seeing them from many other people. Like, if you were signatory, would you give him all your Springbanks? Because we haven't seen them bottle any. Not lately, anyway. Private owners, maybe.
Who knows? Holy crap, the nose on this is pretty crazy.
It's got like this combination. It's both juicy and dusty at the same time.
Yeah, like it's like it's the juiciest condensed fruit you've ever smelled, kind of thing. It's really bursting.
This is flabbergasting. This nose is so good. It's so like linseed oil and ancient kind of styles of whiskey, polished furniture, leather-bound kind of stuff.
It's got that nice little Campbellton funk, but there's also something that reminds me of those like really good parcels of Ben Nevis from the mid-90s that were kind of gooey and fruity at the same time.
Sam
Oh,
says
yeah, this
cola.
reminds me of, sorry, go Sean.
Sam mentioned cola, so that's a good cola. Almost like cherry cola even, or like maybe a bit of both. I did not want to like this very much. I gotta be honest. Like Kurt was like, "Oh, it's so highly rated, whatever," and I was like, "Yeah, but, yeah, whatever."
This reminds me of kind of like old Dalmore a little bit, like Dalmore that had been kind of polished up with an old like Boot Boys rag or something. I don't know.
It also reminds me of like old Gordon MacPhail Strathislas.
Good.
Kind of have this profile too.
Wow, this seems like it's like time traveler of a whiskey.
Well, it's got some cool densities on the palate too. It's really syrupy.
Now, in all the excitement, we missed some comments. James commented, didn't one of these Springbanks, I think he means, come from his friend's basement? Which I like to think that we all have a friend somewhere with a cask of Springbank just maturing in their basement. That would be quite the find. But yeah, I mean, there are people who own them. I seem to remember on tours to Springbank years and years ago, them telling me and pointing out like casks in their warehouse that they know are privately owned, but they don't even know who they belong to. But they can't touch them because they're not their casks. And I don't know, maybe there's Angus has got a detective going around trying to figure out who owns these casks just so he can maybe see if he can buy them off them. But man, James is saying Lawrence Graham. That's a funny one, James.
Andrew, your note on Strathisla is to me that ancient kind of note. This is like old Strathisla meets Glen.
I mean, much more so than the BenRiach. This is very, very antique-y to me on the palate. Old school style, Nice tropical tones, nice soft sherry tones, chocolate, leather, tobacco, but it's still juicy. It's not straying into those spices. It's just, yeah, this is a lovely, lovely ballin'.
That peat is all but gone with the like, well, not quite gone, but like it's mostly on the retronasal where it really kind of pops back with some phenolic tones.
Well, the sherry's really got it kind of quite restrained. Oh man.
That's probably the best whiskey I've tried in the last. I'm kind of speechless.
Mm. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Let's go on to the Williamson. Kind of don't really want to go into the Williamson now because I kind of feel like we've just gone from like a comfortable room with plush chairs and now someone's going to yell at me while trying to choke me.
It wouldn't be worth it to do a speed round of the first four and then move on to the last ones, would it?
First five. I think
Right.
we'll be fine. I think our palates will survive. They'll live to fight another day. So here, I'll pop this up here. Secret Sponge Williamson, 2014 vintage, matured in 2 refill hogsheads and an ex Lafroig butt, bottled at 10 years, 57.1%. Diluted down, and this is crazy, from 65%. A fine example, I think, of some of the insanity we've seen in the industry over the last 10 years as they ramped up production, tried to find places where they could cut corners like casks. So filling them at higher proofs rather than 63.5%. And without going down the rabbit hole on that, I think it's fair to say that most of the most respected distillers today don't think it's a good idea to fill casks at that ABV. This is sold out. Quick nose on this one for me. This is very naked, very spirity. It smells like if someone on Islay decided to make soap for the tourists using Lafroig.
Elsa.
But
Spirits.
maybe they were trying to replicate Dove at the same time.
Did you
That's
say
really
that it's a Williamson finished in a Lafroy cask, like whiskeyception style?
Well, no, I think it was a marriage of 3 casks, 2 refill hoggies, and an ex Lafroig butt. So my read on this is that it was 3 different casks.
Oh, that okay. That raises an interesting point. If 2 of those you can't call Lafroig and one of them you can, wouldn't he be forced to call it a blended malt?
Uh,
from
yeah.
what.
Well, no, because Williamson is not a blended malt. Oh, but I know what you're saying. But I mean, if he's choosing to call it Williamson and you know that Williamson is Lafroig, I don't think you have to call it a blended malt. It's just Williamson.
Yeah, I guess so.
But I mean, that's an interesting thought experiment to suggest to the SWA to see if they do have an answer for that question. Because I would imagine it's probably not been posed before.
I guess if Williamson doesn't just stand for distillery, like you could call anything from Aaron George, and anything that you put in that's Aaron, you could just call it George.
So Tom asking, what did Angus mean by secret sponge? All he meant by that is that they can't call this Lafroig. So it's a secret distillery, although it's not a particularly good, secret. Like people who know that Williamson is Lafroig. And this whiskey is apparently a tribute to Angus's father and his daughter Molly. So there you go. Oh no, that was the last one. This one is for his son Arthur. The previous one was for Molly and his dad.
Oh, really? I thought Arthur was the eyeless. Oh, yeah, that was the 30-year-old.
No, it was like a number 61. It was a release from quite some time ago.
Yeah, I think I have that one. Yeah,
Okay.
that was the Arthur one. Yeah. Okay, have you started tasting this yet? Like the smoke on this is oddly acrid but not in a bad way. Not in a bad way, but it's actually like it's super not unpleasant, but is this like twinge of acridity that's not off-putting. It's just it's abrupt.
It just tastes like unnecessarily young Lafroig to me.
It tastes really, really well done, but it's like citrus on mezcal. A lot of like I get burnt almonds, like an ashiness, but it tastes like almondy vanilla heavy spirit whiskey too.
Yeah. Maybe like a mezcal ceviche, like lemon juice ceviche, like kind of raw fish. Um, I mean, it's interesting. I have to be honest, I don't love this. This is not one of my favorite. But again, like I think I'm at a point now where I am not a huge fan of unnecessarily heavily peated um whiskey. So I'm probably not the best market for this one.
Thomas is
I do.
saying only 100 bottles from 3 casks. I is that what it said?
Well, I'm just trying to do some digging on that right now.
Sometimes he likes to split his parcels up and do things in kind of like batches and additions. Like this might be at this proof, and then maybe he'll do a more general release that's cut further.
Um, just doing a quick look here to see what's on their website for this. Um, yeah, he's gonna bottle the remainder of the butt sometime between 15 and 18 years. So maybe it was two hoggies finished in a butt, but I don't know where that number of bottles come. Yeah, it does say that only 100 bottles on the label. That is kind of crazy. Hmm. Well, nevertheless, it's young, spirity. It's not my jam, especially not after this tasting. Uh, Kurt, Sean, anything else on that one before we move on to the Kalila?
It's pleasant enough to drink, but yeah, I think everyone says like it's not like certainly it's not the best in this line. Well, actually, if it is the best in this lineup, I would like someone to like speak up because that would be very interesting.
Jeff might have the quote of the night here with Indies need to stop killing babies and let the Islay whiskeys get a little age on. It's a bold statement. I mean, if you like peat, you want younger whiskeys because you're going to get more peat. Um, I guess I'm maybe becoming an old man. I don't necessarily want young, rough, old peat anymore, but if it's good, it's good. Uh, Kalila, let me find the page for the Kalila. Where is it here? Islay Sponge Part 6 Kalila. So this is still in stock, 13 years of age. It is a bottling that consists of 2 casks of Kalila married together, bottled at 53%. This is the last of the low-hanging distilleries in our Islay Sponge series. As Angus said, the jury remains out just when exactly we'll bottle Port Ellen or Lagavulin. That is an interesting thought. I mean, I think with the reopening of Port Ellen and Kurt, I don't know if you've been there since they reopened, or I know some people have been following it. I'm quite cynical on this, but I believe they were planning to make it a premium brand when they relaunch, which is an interesting aspiration for a revived old distillery. But anyway, I don't know if you want to comment on that or talk about the whiskey, but you can do one or both.
I'm a very passionate Port Ellen guy. You know that. I am excited about the distillery reopening, but only as a new Islay distillery. That's fun. Like I'm excited, like Port and Truin, excited Holman opened or Ardenhoe. To me, it's just another new Islay. If anybody in their right mind thinks it's going to be anything close to what we know of Port Ellen, they're out to lunch. Nothing about it. It's a new distillery. It's beautiful. I can't wait to visit it, but only as a fun new Islay distillery. in name only, as they say, right?
But you're not looking forward to a $200 5-year-old?
I'm absolutely not. I can't wait to try it. So we'll bill it to all the people in this room so we can split the cost a little bit. We will happily drink it.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the sort of thing that gets punted down the line with the market softening and them needing to bolster maybe they'll do like a limited run. Although with Diageo, that could be 100,000 bottles. So, what exactly is a limited run? But yeah, I mean, I don't know the world needs another leg of Wool an 8-year-old. So
I was like, I mentioned, I think I talked with Kurt about this. Like, I can't wait for the bunch of NAS Port Ellens where it's like all the old stock that fell under 40% that's proved up with 3-year-old.
well, if they're smart, they're doing as the French do and putting them in demijohns.
Can you do that with Scotch whiskey?
Sure, you just have to stop calling it. You can't. It doesn't age anymore, but
Yeah.
you can still reference the vintage, the vintage and that it came from. It just doesn't. You're not adding any more years. And from a purely technical standpoint, it will continue to at least evolve in that demijohn, but it's not going to evaporate away.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So some people commenting here, they love the nose on this. I'd say I like the nose on this a lot more than I did the Williamson.
Matt,
It's cool.
right?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Kurt.
No, Matthew's right. This is awesome. This is a really awesome.
It's a lot of candy notes on the nose for me. Like it's like cinnamon hearts and like not like a fruit roll up or like a fruit by the foot thing. But when you open the package and the gas comes out, it's like gaseous fruit
Mhm.
snack.
Yeah, there's some kind of like fresh brioche buns, like right out of the oven, a little bit of butter on them, which the maltiness in these is kind of surprising for me. And I know the peat's there, I know the salt's there, but I'm not getting it like it's not kind of hitting me in the face right off the bat on the nose.
It's sour fruits. It's like
Mhm.
I get notes of like shaving cream. I get like apricot jam,
Oh, shaving cream, like old school shaving cream would be a good note for this.
oregano.
Mm.
And Andrew, you've probably had a fair bit of this when you pair Arbroath Smokies or Kippers. It was like some kind of smoke, like little fish. Wow, what a cool nose. Cullen skink soup too.
Palate's lovely. I think, and I mean, there's a bit of forgiveness with some of these sponge releases because the quantities are small, but I mean, this is lovely, but the price is stupid. It's $295 is kind of stupid. Like this is a really, really good Kalila, but like the math on this just doesn't work out.
Yeah, it's tough. Like so the closest thing I can compare this to right now are a few of the recent outturn bottlings. Like there was like that New Ager on a Hog and a couple of others that were like a little bit more deeply sherried than this, but in and amongst that quality, and they were sitting at like just shy of 200. So yeah, this is not really, yeah, kind of out to lunch with this one, I suppose.
But I mean, and part of it in Igor's defense, small quantities that pushes the price up. But why would you spend 294 on that when you can have this for 350? Like 20 years old, or not even more than that, 22-year-old, like luscious, creamy, like tropical Kalila. Like, I really hope that we're gonna start seeing even guys like Decadent Drinks putting reasonable prices on some of these whiskeys because it's not sustainable. I mean, that's why they're not sold out. If these things were even $200 a bottle, which I think is too much for a 13-year-old Kalila, they would have sold out.
I'm kind of going with Tom a little bit on this one. This is one of the coolest Kalilas I've had in. There's a lot going on. The nose, the longer it's in the glass, is more old school. I don't know. There's something that's really resonating with me on this one. I can't even conceive of Kalila themselves releasing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
But I
quite
mean,
good.
something can still be like really good and unreasonably expensive. I
That's
mean,
fair.
we see a lot of that. So, and unless we push back on it, it'll continue.
But I got to second what Andrew said. I mean, I said it at the beginning of the night. If you're local to us and you haven't tried it, come try our new Kahlua. Holy crap, it's amazing.
No.
And the BenRiach, you know, I'm unapologetically a BenRiach fan.
Mhm.
Both are incredible. But come see us.
All right. Are we ready to do our speed round here?
Yep.
All right, and I'm just double checking. I'm assuming Evan has a poll for us, though I don't know if this is the equivalent of a work protest, but I will note there is no third cheeky question. He has not taken the time to come up with a cheeky third question for us, which somehow feels, I don't know. Well, I'm disappointed. That's what I'm trying to say. Back to Glen Grant.
Sitting around there, the nose is so nice on it. It's like honeysuckle and pineapple for me.
Well, it's kind of Kleinlish-esque. I mean, it's not quite as waxy, but it's got that soft, fruity, floral profile to it. Or even like chasing a little bit of Imperial.
Imperial's a great call.
Especially some of those older ones, like Kurt, that 29, the SMOS 29.
Mm.
And it's very hand soapy, like those really, really soft, like ivory soap or something white, almost shea butter kind of smelling.
Yeah, the palette is like a Bed Bath and Beyond, but Beyond Explosion. Or no, what is it? Not that, not Bed Bath and Beyond. What's the place in the mall where like all
Oh,
the
Lush.
teenage girls go to get soaps and scents? What are
Lush?
you talking about? Someone will know here. Someone's gonna know this. There's one in the downtown mall that I have to walk past, and I have to go like wide around it because the aromas leaving the retail shop are just too overpowering.
It's not Lush or Sephora or
No, well,
Stop.
Sephora's bad. It's something else. I don't. It's not. It's not Sephora. I love. I do have to do a wide berth around Sephora as well. I don't know what is. Hey, it doesn't matter. Let's not waste time on this. Bath and Body Works is probably what it is. It's too much, but that's a hell of a Glen Grant. BenRiach. Ooh,
that's more
Whoa,
apple pie like now.
it's so caramelly, and I hate caramel as a descriptor, but it's so caramelly.
it's definitely channeling Ardmore now. Like old sherry Ardmore. Nice eat more note. It's a little untamed.
Doug says nutty E150.
Nutty E150 vibes. Yeah, it is there's a little bit of a syrupiness to this. I don't know. I still suspect even if it was long term, this I don't know why, but this to me just kind of screams finished.
It's still a
Wet
cool
malt.
dram. It's a really neat like old BenRiach.
Mhm.
Kind of a intriguing.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Okay. Blended malt. Getting a little bit of like cold Campbell's tomato soup.
Oh yeah, a bit more savory, eh?
And those deep, deep, deep like reduction notes, they get so heavy. They almost, I get where people kind of conflate them with sulfur, but it's clean to me. It's just that almost burnt.
Sean?
It, I'm not sure about the flavor right now. Just very light, mellow. It's turned into something very, very drinkable.
It's gotten quite dumpy to me on the palate. I have slid in just because the Berries blended malt 1999 into the lineup, and have to say it's quite a bit more juicy and tropical than this. So I don't know. I found this one the second time around, that blended malt kind of fell flat for me on the palate.
It's less than 46, right? I think
Oh, is
that
it?
one probably maybe needs to be drunk a little bit faster than that.
That's
45
fair.
1.
That's
Yeah.
fair, yeah. Oh man, so right away on that Bowmore, it's like it just screams big vanilla wafers.
Oh, it's so
Oh.
buttery too, like butter, like overly buttered shortbread with like dusted with like refined sugar.
And I'm kind of sad
Shortbread's
that this
really-
is gone now.
Those like co-op birthday cakes with that custardy creamy layer in the middle of it kind of reminds me of that custard cream.
Is that not just buttercream? Do they do something different? Oh no, I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah, I got
Yeah,
you.
it's just some weird, I don't know what they dope it with. It's almost like a pudding.
You don't mean fondant, do you?
No, it's like this puddingy kind of stuff in the middle of a cake.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think fondant's edible.
It's pretty gross. Amazing Bowmore.
Yeah,
Now I had a bottle of that.
Yeah, yeah,
that is
incredible.
lovely. I mean, I think for me, that's a bit, that one is kind of the wild card in this lineup because I don't know, I think it punches above its age more than some of those older whiskeys do that we started off with. All right, back. Sorry, Sean?
Sorry, I should just say if anybody it's I'm not going to call it a replacement, but something that kind of hits in a realm that's kind of similar. I think we still have a few bottles of the SMWS Fagile Bowmore, the 18. I think it's called a Warming Hug. Excellent price, 18-year-old bourbon matured Bowmore, fantastic.
And if you're not a society member, you get a membership with purchase of that bottle. So
I think
Springbank
that's what it's
settled
called.
down a little bit. Sorry, Sean?
I think that's what it's called. Don't quote me on the. You can always call and ask us.
Well, just come into the store and tell people that Sean told you he'd give you a hug.
Oh,
I think
Jeff's
that's
got
what
it.
I heard. That if you come into the store, you'll give Sean a hug. Or Sean will give, well, you know what I mean. You can hug each other as long as you have consent.
I give consent for a hug.
It's very, very, very big of you, Sean. The Springbank's kind of like, it's still lovely on the nose, but it's a little bit shy.
Do you have it in the blender glass, Andrew?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
The palate's still there. Like it is superb. Sean, like you, I wanted to not like that as much as I like it.
Yeah.
So
You know what? To be fair, okay, now that it's been sitting in the glass for a bit, I'm getting some similarities between this and our latest BenRiach. Those kind of like those vitamin-y, sweet tart kind of candied like notes. The sherry, obviously, it's different, but the base notes are there, which is kind of cool.
yeah. Kurt, nothing
I
to
love
say?
I'll reiterate what I said earlier. That's probably the best whiskey I've tried.
Lars is asking, do they let you re-up your long expired SMWS membership? You know what, Lars, if you're long expired and you buy a society bottle, you can just start over as a new member. So this is just the Williamson now is more approachable than it was on the nose. It's just loads and loads of barley.
It smells like Kalila. Yes, it's very barley. It smells like Kalila to me.
It does smell a little bit like Kalila. I do agree with Jeff, though, that I think this could have benefited from more time. Very mezcal, ceviche, a little bit of like medicinal smoke.
It's good. Oh, Matthew, that's a great call. It does kind of has that nakedness of the point.
Yeah, I mean, and I think for me, like, Kurt, did you do that Octomore tasting with me? I can't remember who did that that lineup.
Not.
Sean, were you in on that one?
Which one, sorry?
The Octomore tasting.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah. I mean, I like them, but I think that tasting just reminded me that like I don't feel a special need for 5-year-old cast strength peated Islay malts. So as good as some of those are.
I like Kurt and I were talking about it, I think a while ago, and I think he brought that up with you too. And like they're just not styles that I gravitate towards whatsoever. Like we get so much in the store now too, because I don't know, well, it's just part of the trend, but I personally feel myself just not buying like any of it really.
But I mean, here's a perfect question for you. Like, what are you more likely to have another dram of? Like, if you open a bottle of Octomore, are you likely to pour yourself a second heavy pour of that? I mean, to me, it's so hard on the palate. And it's not to say that it's not interesting or it doesn't have a place. But if I've got something a little more delicate like that Bowmore, I could very easily see myself having 2 or 3 pours of that. And I think that for me is the big difference.
Absolutely.
100%.
Just don't tell that to Sammy. Not Sammy in this chat, but Sammy from the shop.
From the store.
He loves his peat.
But
James saying it's fine if they're value priced, which is a promo for Michael Tour. Michael Tour. If you're tired of paying $300 for Octomore, buy Michael Tour.
To their credit, however, Bruichladdich, I think, is killing it right now. And Octomore is the best example of a 5-year-old to see coming out nowadays, I think. But it's raw. It's underdeveloped for what I'm looking for right now. I think the same as you, Andrew. But it's pretty flawless as young whiskey. Pretty amazing.
Agreed. But I just don't want it. So
yeah,
you need a market for it. And I don't know, maybe that market is changing, evolving. Like we'll see where things go. But for me, I'm just not really into 5-year-old peated malts.
Yeah.
Kalila, still lovely. Getting a bit of bacon and like steamed mussels now.
Yeah, it's like this. The seafood note comes through a lot more now than it did when I first picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a really damn. I wish the price was lower by at least $100, but this is awesome.
Yeah, Kurt, I'll give you. This is a lovely Kalila. It reminds me. We did a number of we've done 5 Kalilas from Gordon MacPhail over the years, but it reminds me of a 2002 we did like a decade ago. That was from a refill sherry cask. And it reminds me of that. Lars is saying this is good. It would be his jam if it was 120. Well, Lars, I'm just putting it into the chat right now, but I've got a Kalila for you. And if you guys haven't tried this, I'm sure most of you have, but if you haven't tried it and you want to pay less, I can do a third. Granted, it's only an 8-year-old, but this 8-year-old rum finished Kalila that we've got is worth trying. Great value, $110. And I mean, I think that's a sign of where a lot of things are going. With that particular cask, the agent said, "Hey, I've got a Kalila. Are you interested?" And I said, "I'm interested if you can keep the price below X," by which I meant my wholesale. And I just expected that he would say, "No, I can't do it." And he got back to me the next day and he said, "Deal." And we got the sample. I mean, 2 years ago, Kalila people could charge almost what they wanted for it because the distillery wasn't selling. There was a shortage, at least on the open market of it. There is no shortage of it today. Independent ballers have got it. And I guess my point on this is, and fair enough, maybe Angus overpaid for this when he bought it, but almost $300 is not a reasonable price, even for a stunning 13-year-old Kalila. So
hard to argue that.
Sorry, Andrew, when you said that it was like an O2, did you was it one of those G&M casks that we had in the white tube things?
With the little window.
Yeah,
in it.
okay. Yeah.
I don't know if you
Totally.
remembered, but 2 years in a row, we did two different casks of Kalila from G&M. And it was shortly before they stopped selling single casks. Like there was a period where they just turned off the single cask tap. And it was shortly before Authentic took over, maybe 2 years before that. But like we did 4 Kalila casks with them that were young and frankly gorgeous whiskeys back in the day. And I think there were still opportunities coming our way, but the prices just weren't there. So great lineup. Kurt, Sean, I'm gonna let you guys think about your favorites. While we do that, I'm gonna trigger the poll here. Now, I thought of what I at least think is a good cheeky third question. It's not in the poll, but you could put it in the chat. Which of tonight's whiskeys would you overpay for? I guess is my cheeky third question. So, knowing that some of these weren't cheap, like the BenRiach was what, $1,500. The Springbank was, Kurt, what was that, $2,000, somewhere in that neighborhood? Like, so those are the prices. Which whiskey in tonight's lineup? The Bowmore was 7. I think the blended malt was 3, close to 300. What would you overpay for is the cheeky third question while you guys are busy answering the poll. So Kurt's already got his answer. Sean, I'm going to start with you. You get 3 favorites for tonight's lineup. What are your 3 favorites in this range?
Well, I get all three, eh? I kind of want to admit the Springbank. So with that in mind, I would say the Bowmore is number 1 for me. The Glen Grant is number 2, and the Caol would be number 3.
Cool. Okay. I respect that. Kurt, your top 3 whiskeys.
Number 3 kind of surprised me. The BenRiach, very very cool. And the longer it's in the glass, the more interesting it's getting for me. Very fruit leathery and stuff now. I had the Glen Grant ahead, but now this one's number 2. That Bowmore. Any other tasting that would have been number 1. Bullet, incredible Bowmore, probably the best I've tried in years. Maybe 60s Bowmore, really. And number 1, that Springbank. Question, it's done.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that one too. I reluctantly have to admit that the Springbank is my favorite whiskey in the lineup. Bowmore is my number 2, and I'm going to go Glen Grant for number 3. I like the BenRiach, but I liked I think the Glen Grant was better for not having as much oak as the BenRiach does. It just allows more fruits, more spirit to come through on that. So I did ask that question while we're waiting for the poll to be completed. 2 of you have yet to vote, so you've got a minute. While we're doing that, I'm going to just quickly run through answers to my question. So Josh saying he would overpay for the Bowmore. Phil and Suzanne, being the responsible folks they are, saying none. They wouldn't overpay for any of them. Fair enough. Kevin, what have we got here? I'm overpaying. I'm already close to overpaying for the Kalilas, so that's got to be it. Thomas, the Bowmore. I mean, if you like that Bowmore, it's not quite as creamy, but for this almost the same amount of money, that KWM 97 is close to the same price, and that Bowmore is gone. Matthew saying the Kalila, it's expensive, but damn, it's nice. Not gonna lie, the Glen Grant is hell of expensive, but I really like that. And James saying Mikel Turbo, which is yet another promo for Mikel Tor. Octomore, are you tired of paying $300? Try Mikel Tor. The ads, James, they write themselves. Okay, let's see how the votes go here. No one else has voted, so we're still stuck at 19 of 21 available. So the winner, I'll share this here for top whiskey in tonight's tasting, is it's a tie between the Bowmore and the Springbank. You gotta love that. That's pretty cool to see. The Springbank did not win outright. Glen Grant number 3, and then BenRiach and Kalila getting votes. Second favorite, oh my God, tie again between the Bowmore and the Springbank, with Glen Grant number 3. I mean, I think the results there are pretty bloody clear. It's like Bowmore, Springbank, and Glen Grant. Pretty cool to see those results. Well, guys, I think that was a pretty awesome lineup tonight. That was a good tasting. And I have yet to lose my voice. I'm going to get to the end of this thing without it failing.
I thought you were just putting on the sexy phone voice for some kind of act.
Well,
Okay.
Kurt, you know, you're in the tasting with me tonight. Needed to turn on the charm a little bit. So
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. This is probably the best tasting I've done. Cool range, very cool range. I think the Williamson in any other range probably would have showed fairly well. I think it was just a little overshadowed tonight. Still a good whiskey, but the rest of them I think were great. And a couple of them were absolutely exceptional.
in fairness to the Williamson, it was literally just filling out the range. That was the reason why it was in tonight's lineup. I still think it should have been left in cask longer, but that's just me. Kurt, Sean, any other final words before we move on? Stop the steal.
No, not so much. No, that was brilliant. That was absolutely an incredible lineup.
Yeah. Well, as Sammy said, so fucking good. What a tasting. You have to be 18 to follow us on both YouTube and Facebook. So I believe we are allowed to swear
we
if
still
it's tasteful.
are we monetized?
Well, we got to build our YouTube following, Sean, then we'll be monetized. But I also don't think we're quite organized enough and dedicated enough to achieve monetization. And even if you do, I mean, I don't want to name them, but someone was bemoaning to me that they've got a monetized YouTube and it barely pays for a couple of bottles of whiskey a month. So, I mean, how much effort do we want to put into that?
And nowadays people don't watch like 2-hour videos unless it's on like very specific topics that are like not like this. That's what if you look up the origin of bread tube, that's what that's about.
Bread tube.
Yeah, it's a weird kind of like a lefty thing where it's like progressive YouTubers they'll make a 3-hour video on the origins of bread and then like they'll get like thousands of subscribers.
I mean, that somehow makes me disheartened for the future of humanity.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Anyway, Sean, Kurt, thank you for joining tonight. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed the tasting. It was a fun lineup. More to come in the future, but until next time, have a good night, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys. See you.